Welcome to the Kitsap Matters podcast. In each episode, we discuss the people, places, and things that make Kitsap County unique, covering local entertainment, restaurants, business, government, and anything else we find interesting, troubling, or just plain amusing. A brief disclosure, this is a community-focused podcast, not a financial podcast, but sometimes financial topics do arise. And since the host is a licensed financial professional, we have to include the following disclosure in every episode. The strategies and concepts discussed are for educational purposes only and do not represent specific investment, tax, or estate planning advice. Investing carries an inherent element of risk, and it's in everyone's best interest to consult a tax, legal, or investment professional. Kevin Campbell is an investment representative of, and advisory services are offered through USA Financial Securities Corporation, a registered investment advisor located at 6020 East Fulton Street, Ada, Michigan, 49301. Peaks Financial is not affiliated with USA Financial Securities Corporation. Hi, you're listening to the Kitsap Matters podcast. I'm Kevin Campbell, and I'm here with my co-host, Christine Campbell.
Hey.
And we're excited to have with us today newly elected, well, I guess it's not quite so new anymore, Judge Shane Seaman. He's going to be with us on the show today. Judge, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Or Shane.
Thank you for having me. Shane's fine.
Shane's fine.
Shane's fine.
So now, if you're familiar at all with Peaks Financial, you've probably heard of what we call our SAIL formula. This process is all about the key parts of our planning philosophy, with the first four letters of formula being FORM, representing family, occupation, recreation, and money. It's all about what matters most and what you can control. So what's fun about that with our planning approach is that it provides a great outline for this interview today, and we're going to be talking about family, occupation, recreation, and money. So today we're diving into Shane's story and what matters to him. So let's jump right in and get started. Thanks again for being here.
Well, thank you again for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
And it's awesome because we're totally ambushing you. You have no idea what we're going to ask.
I don't.
Which is great.
Do you ever feel like you're on the hot seat?
Well, yeah, every day in court.
Right, just daily.
This is a daily occurrence, but this is a different format, I guess.
Right.
Today, so.
Right.
So, as I just talked about, the format of our podcast typically follows kind of family, occupation, recreation. Obviously, we're financial planners, we're financial advisors. This is what we do, but this isn't really just a money show. It's actually, as the title says, of the podcast talks about, it's Kitsap Matters. So we're really after is what are the people, places, and things in Kitsap County that make it unique. So will I be asking you about a few things about that as well, like some of what do you think the best kept secrets are of Kitsap County and that kind of stuff as well. So we're gonna throw you a few curveballs along the way. But first, tell us a little bit about you. And I was looking at your bio some. You were Coast Guard, went to law school, and were a prosecutor and county coroner.
I was.
That must have been interesting.
That was an interesting job.
And then on to private practice and built your law firm here in Poulsbo, and then recently became a judge.
That's true. Yeah. No, so I grew up in Kitsap County. Went to South Kitsap High School, and it didn't end up graduating at South Kitsap because my last year of high school I moved to California, but I came back and attended Olympic College, and then about a year and a half in, I think maybe 2 years in, decided that didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so anybody who's looking for that direction, I was a big believer, and I always will be, joining the military, and so I joined the United States Coast Guard. And when I was in, I thought, I'm going to drive boats. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be one of these guys that gets out at Cape D, and I'm going to rescue people,
right.
And I'm going to drive boats.
Launching the boats.
Oh, man, that's what I thought I was going to do. But then I got underway a few times and realized I got seasick.
That's a slight problem.
Dashed.
And I'd grown up boats my entire life here in Kitsap, and then find out when I'm out at sea that I was tending to get a little seasick. So I took a job at an air station, got stationed in North Carolina, and I finished my bachelor's degree. And then made a real tough choice whether to stay in the Coast Guard or to get out, and decided to go to law school. And at that time, I've been accepted to several universities in the Northwest, but I decided the one that I really wanted to go to was Gonzaga. I really liked Gonzaga. I liked Spokane. It was a small town. And so my wife and I moved there. And after Gonzaga, came back and started that job, as you noted, up in Port Townsend. I was a prosecutor and a deputy county coroner. So didn't know that was going to be my job when I came out.
I didn't know that those overlapped.
So in small counties by statute, the elected prosecutor is also the deputy coroner, or is the coroner. And so as a deputy prosecutor, I was a deputy coroner. Now it's not what you would think. We're not doing autopsies or anything like that. It's more of a jurisdictional question.
I just feel like I could see you like with a mask and gloves on going, they didn't cover this in law school. This could get messy.
Right.
No, there was some difficult scenes, but no, in this case it was really just to make sure that the deceased person's body was properly cared for, appropriately taken care of, and to make sure that the next steps were adequately proceeded, I guess, as required under the law. Whereas in bigger counties actually have an elected coroner. So that's the difference.
So I'm hearing you say that a coroner is not a medical examiner.
Not a medical examiner.
So,
no. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, not even. Didn't touch any of that in law school whatsoever.
Right. When I was in middle school, I wanted to be a medical examiner. What was that TV back in the 80s? Quincy.
Quincy, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Quincy MD. Yeah.
yes.
I wanted to be Quincy MD. Yeah.
There were some interesting things that I had to go to, but I really did like focusing on law. And so actually after a couple of years of being in the prosecutor's office, I went into private practice and decided I wanted to focus my practice, but in Jefferson County, it's a smaller county, and so we sometimes practice what you call rental law. That is whatever paid the rent, right?
Right, yeah.
Just whatever, so you ended up taking a little...
It's the anything for a buck version.
Exactly. You took a lot of different cases. So I did things from family law to criminal defense to some tort cases to probate cases and to real estate cases. But ultimately decided I really liked real estate litigation and probate litigation. So when I moved my office down here in 2011, that's what I ended up doing.
So it sounds like you have a pretty wide breadth of what you have practiced. How did that help you with the role that you have as being judge, having seen all those facets?
Well, I think one of the things that really helps with me a lot is that as a judge, you never know what's going to walk in your door. And, in district court, we actually have quite a breadth of litigation. It's not as expansive as Superior Court. We're more limited in what we do. We do gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors, so those are crimes. We handle a lot of civil actions, contract disputes, and damage, property damage or personal damage up to $100,000, and then we do a lot of tickets. But to your question, how has it helped me? Well, it's given me that ability to kind of see the different sides of different cases and different issues. So, for example, I was hearing a case yesterday, and it was a protection order case, but really the underlying issue was a landlord-tenant question. Somebody wanted their tenant out. So, I was able to recognize, okay, this is what this is really about. There's a different statute that applies. There's a different process. And so I didn't grant ultimately the request, but I, at least in the hearing, was able to give the litigants an idea of, okay, well, this is the direction you need to go. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I'm telling you this isn't the right court for it, and we can get into more of that later, but this isn't the right court. There's somewhere else you need to go. So,
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Interesting.
I was going to say, you said that you were North Carolina and you and your wife moved back here. Where did you meet your wife?
So I've known my wife since 7th grade.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Her mom was my 5th grade teacher. So
wow.
Her family is originally homesteaded in this area. They homesteaded down in the Brownsville area, actually. And my family's been in this area actually a very long time. When my dad was 5 years old, my grandfather was at PSNS, and there was one of the houses close to the gate, one on the officers' row, and that's where my dad lived. So when he was 5 years old, he was living on base at PSNS. But my wife grew up in South Kitsap. I grew up in South Kitsap, but we didn't actually start dating until we were at Olympic College. So
wow.
I've known her a long time, but we didn't
wow.
actually start dating.
How
and then,
crazy.
We got married in 2001.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when you came in, I heard you talking, do you have kids?
I have two beautiful young girls. I've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they both come up North Kitsap here.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just up the street.
Yep.
So as you look at family, what or who would you say has had the biggest impact on you today?
For my family, I would say my grandfather. So on my mom's side, although my grandfather on my dad's side was quite an amazing man too, it's actually kind of hard to pick the two of them. Right. But he died when I was younger. But my grandfather died a couple of years ago, and he was a gastroenterologist, started a clinic in Tacoma. So like I said, we've had roots here a long time. He actually opened one of the first gastroenterology clinics in the Tacoma area, and that clinic has since grown. There's actually a building now in Tacoma with his name on it.
Wow.
It's the Denny Waldron Clinic. So, but he was always an inspiration because he taught me a lot about just, hard work, but family. He had 6 kids, my aunts and uncles, a family still in the area, very passionate man, very dedicated man, a very, very spiritual man. He was a dedicated Christian man, and I think he taught me a lot of his values and what was important to him. So.
Sounds like, and too, being what he was into service and service of others, taking that route. And I know you from our local Rotary Club.
Yes.
So I see that you are carrying the service torch on. So I like to see that.
Yeah. Well, Rotary's been just a wonderful thing here.
I love the Rotary here.
The Rotary organization here in Poulsbo is fantastic.
It's like a second family.
Yep.
It really is.
So as you think about your professional path, was there anybody in your family that kind of helped guide you towards legal? Was there any kind of correlation there between family and legal, or was this a complete, hey, nobody in the family's ever done that before?
No, I have an uncle that he's retired just recently, but he was an attorney. So he bankruptcy trustee in Tacoma. Although he probably wasn't the biggest influence for me, it was actually a good friend of my dad's. His name was Bob Millar, and he was a attorney down in Chico, California. And if Bob, you're hearing this, kudos to you. He sat me down one time when I was in high school, and like so many young people, especially, and I see this a lot, I think in some of the young defendants that I have, no direction. You don't know what you're going to do.
Right.
And Bob was a person that sat me down one day after we had done a race, and he said, "You should go to law school." Why should I go to law school? I didn't know what I wanted to do. It's like, you should go to law school. And he gave me some reasons why. And that stuck at the back of my head. And even though when I went into college, I didn't know that was what I wanted to do. When I went into the Coast Guard, again, I said I want to drive boats. I didn't know that was what I wanted to do. But ultimately, that inspiration, and I saw what he did. And then I had a professor when I was in North Carolina who was an adjunct professor, and I took business law, and I just fell in love with it. Just at that point, it's like, okay, this is the path I'm going to go. So it wasn't a family member, but Bob was kind of like family to me. I mean, kind of like your extended family. Mm-hmm. You have your friends and your parents' friends that are all surround you and kind of watch out for you as you grow up, make sure you're not getting in too much trouble.
Right, part of the village.
Yeah. He was part of the village. He was one of those people.
So that's a very cool story, but something I picked up on that I have to ask another question about is you just finished a race. Mm-hmm. What kind of race? What were you racing?
Well, that was the election race is the one you're getting.
Oh, the election race.
No, which one?
You said you were with them and you just finished a race down in California.
No, this was back when he encouraged me to go to law school. I used to run marathons.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
And triathlons. I'm not doing so many these days anymore, but yeah, I used to be a big racer.
Okay, awesome. So transitioning to occupation, we've already talked a little bit about that and what led you to that journey. But what do you find the most enjoyable about what you do now, about being a judge? I mean, because that was a big shift, right?
It was a major shift.
I mean, obviously still very much involved in law, but from going from being an attorney, running your own practice and managing staff. I mean, obviously you're still managing staff and all that. Tell us about that. What kind of a transition is that?
Well, I love what I do. So as an attorney, I didn't dislike being an attorney. I actually loved being an attorney. But as an attorney, it's a very different role. So as an attorney, you're an advocate, right? So if you came into me, just like what you guys do with financials, somebody comes into you with a problem, maybe I want to invest something, or how do I best help serve my client? As an attorney, somebody would come into me, and the type of litigation that I did, people were usually in crisis mode. It's either I've been sued or I've got a major issue going on. I'm in deep, hot water. The type of practice I had was very litigation heavy, so I was in court a lot. As a judge, so I got familiar with court. As a judge, it's a different role, and the reason I like it a little bit better is I'm the umpire. So I get to hear the cases now, and so instead of being the advocate, I get to hear both sides. And I've always liked that. the law. I mean, even when I was advocating for my clients, I'd always sit down and kind of analyze it. Well, okay, well, what's my worst case scenario? Where's my weaknesses in the case? And of course, then you always want to downplay this because you want to try. You're advocating. That's part of the system. You're trying to advocate. You're trying to, figure out a way to legally win a case. Whereas as a judge, I get to be that umpire. Now, specifically, like in criminal cases, I also get to be a little bit of hopefully a voice of inspiration. Some of my most favorite defendants are the ones that I have seen hit rock bottom and then figure out a way to climb their way back up. So a good example is I was at an event last year during the campaign, and a gentleman walked up to me, and this, of course, post-COVID, we'd come out of COVID, and during COVID, we saw everybody on screen, and so I didn't immediately recognize him because he wasn't two-dimensional.
Right.
And he comes up to me and he looks at me and he says, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm doing okay." And I looked at him and said, "Who are you?" And then I realized who it was, and I won't share the name here, I won't embarrass him, but I was like, oh my gosh, I realized at that moment, I was like, how are you? How you doing? And he tells me, hey, look, I'm sober and I got my license back. And he said, you were hard on me, but thank you. I had a guy about 3 weeks ago, similar situation. He was sitting in front of me and he said, hey, I just want you to know that you gave me a talk last time I was in here about the most important job I'll ever do is being a dad. And he goes, I took that seriously. I'm going to start refereeing. I got a job. I'm in treatment. I've got my license back. My wife is pregnant. She was back in the back. She's crying. And of course, these are tears of joy because she saw him coming out of such a traumatic event in his life, and he was able to succeed. So, I mean, there's just nothing more rewarding than that to me.
Yeah, no kidding.
I just love it. And sometimes it almost, people think it's kind of cheesy, I think, maybe, but it almost brings tears to my eyes. I'm on the bench, and I see that success, and I go, thank God I got to be here.
Yeah, that's why you're there.
That's why. And I thank the voters of Kitsap County. You guys put me here. And so every day I go in there, and I'm like, what exciting thing do I get to see today? Whose life do I maybe get to impact? Now, it's not every day. Some days are hard. Yeah. But
hopefully in a positive way.
But
right?
But your question was, what's my favorite thing and the difference in the role? And I think that's probably one of my favorite things, that just to see the impact we can have. So.
And I'm guessing you have a lot less case prep.
Yeah.
I'm sure you still got to do some research, right? Because you have, I'm sure.
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. So, we do still prep our cases. So every morning we come in, we read what's on our calendar, we look at the file and stuff. But whereas with a client, I might been up all night on a Friday night reading depositions and making sure that I knew exactly every potential issue that might be asked and the law that applied. Whereas as a judge, it's not the same prep. It's a different prep. So we're in there reviewing the cases. We're looking at the history so that we're prepared to address the legal arguments. But it's harder to get prepared because we don't always know what the legal arguments
coming.
Be.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, okay, what's coming at me? Play a little fastball.
How good does your file explorer in your brain?
Right, the search engine.
Yeah, the search engine.
You use the circle. Is that when when the computer pauses? That's my brain sound of
buffering.
Buffering.
We used to talk about that all the time when our kids were little, and they'd walk up to us, and you've got little ones, right? Or and, they're not quite as little anymore, but like when they walk up and they go, Dad, and you go, yeah, and they go, and we would just start going, buffering.
There are times where that definitely happens, but I think that the question is, do you have the recall? And I think that is kind of the fun part. It's like, oh yeah, I remember there's this case that applies, or there's this rule that applies. Sometimes you're pulling it from the deepest recesses of your mind. Other times you're sitting up there, you're going, gosh, I know that there's something here. So you have to step off the bench and actually look it up. But I like that part.
Wow. I think that's true in almost any profession. We run through the same thing. Obviously, we work in a very highly regulated industry with tons of things going on, and every now and again you have to go, I don't remember, I'll have to look it up, right? There's just, I can only store so much in here. And especially when, I guess they're very, very similar from the standpoint of finance and law. where if you stacked all the books that are relevant on top of each other of law and regulatory stuff, they would be enormous.
Yeah, and it's trying to put all that from here to here. It's like sometimes it's
Yep.
wow.
I have a book sitting on my desk that's about that thick. And, well, for the people on the podcast who not looking at video, it's like 3 inches thick.
Yeah.
And it is the quick reference guide to some recent tax updates. 3 inches thick. That's not Secure Act 2.0. That is the quick reference guide for Secure Act 2.0.
I can never understand how tax attorneys do what
Yeah.
they do. I mean, you got to really love that tax code.
Yeah. So, last question about occupation before we go into recreation. What would you say is the biggest misconception about being a judge or being an attorney, either one?
Well, my biggest misconception. So, judges are people. So that might be the biggest misconception.
That you're actually human?
That we are actually human.
And actually have a heart or something like.
Well, I think if a judge says something, it gets blown out where it gets magnified, just tremendous amounts of time. The judge didn't like what I said, or they didn't buy my argument, so I must be bad or I must be evil. I mean, no, that's not true. I mean, as an attorney, I sometimes felt like that, arguing in front of a judge. I was like, what did I do wrong? I thought I did everything right. And I still lost. Judges are people, and so I think that is probably the biggest misconception. We have a difficult job where in a very short amount of time, we are, making decisions that have a massive impact on people's lives. And we recognize that. I mean, trust me, I talked to judges. I just went to a conference, actually, a statewide conference with all the judges in the state. And we're talking about the same thing. It's a very common theme. We recognize that what we do has massive impact. But, it's not easy, and we don't do things out of malice or spite. We really do try to make the right decision. And so I think people sometimes don't forget about that with the judge. They just see the result and they think, oh, that judge they hated me, or that judge didn't like me. No, I can promise you that judge probably sat in the back and sweated over that decision for a while and talked to their colleagues when they could. And because they're people and they really do want to make the right call. And I know I do, and I know that my benchmates in Kitsap County District Court do. We always are thinking, okay, what's the right thing? What's the legally right thing to do, but what's the equitable thing to do? What's the fair thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, I said that was going to be the last occupation question,
right.
but apparently it's not. Do you see, how much do you see in your world in judges, and obviously you're part of the district here, but beyond that, I mean, there are times before, and we see it on the news, like of police officers who end up jaded just after so many years of dealing with such, in some cases, negative stuff. People just sometimes become almost immune to it, or in some cases jaded, or perhaps even a little
cynical, maybe.
Cynical, or I was going to say overly not ambitious, but where they can become jaded and cynical. Do you see that on the courts?
No, I do think it does actually happen to judges. There is a real concern, and I noticed that as a litigator over the years that there were some judges that you just said, hey, they were at the end of their term, they kind of stopped caring.
Yeah.
And I hope to never be there. I mean, if I ever get there, you guys are welcome to slap me upside the head and say, knock it off.
All right, we've got it on tape, right? The judge just said we can slap him upside the head.
Yeah, don't be cynical, Shane.
Right?
Right?
I don't think he actually meant that, but I'm pretty sure hitting a judge upside the head is not going to work out well for you.
Yeah, technically it is a felony.
Okay, how about a rhetorical?
A rhetorical
slap.
Yeah, a rhetorical slap. Yeah.
But I mean, it does happen. And it's unfortunate that it happens, and you do occasionally see that, where judges operate outside the law, and they do things that we just as the average citizen go, what were you thinking? What the heck is going on here? And people, unfortunately, they have a real mistrust, I think, of our institutions. And some things coming out of the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court haven't made it better. There's some decisions that, unless you really are at the level of a constitutional law scholar, maybe like a Jonathan Turley over at Columbia, most of us don't understand, like, what are you doing? It's crazy. So I do think they can become a little almost cynical.
Yeah.
But I think most people do try. I mean, most judges really try to do what is right and what is fair and what is equitable. So.
All right, so we hit on family already. We've hit on occupation.
Sure.
Next is recreation. So when you're not at work, what do you do? What's your fun stuff?
Well, I'm looking at your guys' beautiful picture over here across. You guys can't see it on the podcast, but they've got this beautiful picture of Liberty Bay, and we're looking at the marina. If I had my way, I'd be out on Liberty Bay every day on a boat, and preferably if you're sailing or fishing. Okay, so that's what I love to do. Realistically, what I do is the other thing I love to do, so I don't mean to minimize it. That's where I could spend my time if I could, as I do stuff with my kids. So I'm really active in North Kitsap High School with the band boosters, currently KCMT. They have Bye Bye Birdie coming up.
For everybody who doesn't know what KCMT is.
Kitsap Children's Music Theater.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Kitsap Children's Music Theater. I have Bye Bye Birdie coming up at the North Kitsap High School Auditorium. I'm building sets, and I'm doing stage crew. So right now, that's where I spend my free time.
Right. Well, you said you had a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, right?
12-year-old, 15-year-old. So
that is the job when you have 12-year-old and 15-year-olds.
It is, and it's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Being a
and
parent.
It goes by so fast.
It does. And I love being a dad. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better job.
Yeah, I've told my kids that. Believe I don't know if they've ever believed me. That's absolutely my favorite. My favorite name has been Dad.
Yeah, it
Right?
is.
Best job.
You can't ask for anything better. And I imagine with Christine being a mom. I mean, I tell that to people all the time. But no offense to us dads, but there is one job that's more important than us.
Yep.
And that's being a mom. Absolutely.
It's pretty major.
Yep. It's a big one.
It is.
So, what else? So you talk sailing. So you've been sailing a long time. Obviously, you can tell by the artwork around the office and stuff. And the fact that
Our formula is
our
the
formula is
sail
called the sail
formula.
formula.
Noticed that a little bit.
So we're definitely into boating and sailing. And before the pandemic, we used to be very heavy into racing.
Did you know?
But the racing kind of killed the pandemic kind of killed our sailboat racing. So do you just pleasure sail? You do any racing?
So I've not been into racing yet, but I do have a little Coronado 15. You guys know what those are? Yeah, so I got a Coronado 15. My daughter and I like to go out on, and so I'd love to start racing that. But I started early years and years and years ago windsurfing on the Puget Sound.
Oh, how fun.
Wow.
Yeah, so down at Purdy Spit actually is where I used to do it a lot. But the wind was always a little inconsistent. Tried Hood River a few times, and then as I got older, a buddy of mine, good friend of mine, ended up getting a sailboat. I never owned a big one, but he did, and so I just used to crew with him a lot. But my grandfather, so you asked me who's the most influential person in my life, was my grandfather, and so I've done the inside passage to almost the end of Southeast Alaska probably 3 times.
Nice.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list. So I love boating. I love boating. I love sailing. I like being on the water, which is why I love living in Paulsville.
All right, so I'm going to put a bug in your ear.
Sure.
R2AK, have you heard of it?
R2AK.
The race to Alaska.
it's
Oh,
the
okay, Race to Alaska.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to get really hardcore,
That does sound hardcore.
that is incredibly hardcore.
It
No
is.
engines, no support boats.
Ooh,
It is hardcore.
Yeah.
It takes off out of Port Townsend every June, I think.
Yes,
May or
every
June.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it is
It's at
hardcore.
Ketchikan.
All right. Well, sometime I get some time, I think I might look that up.
And there's some crazy. It's truly so. Pretty much everybody who does this race is
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy.
Right.
I think it's a prerequisite. The really crazy ones, there are some people. There's one guy who did it on a paddleboard
Yeah.
to Ketchikan, from Port Townsend to Ketchikan.
Yeah.
I don't know if he actually made it all the way or not.
I don't
know.
recall.
There are people doing it in
did it
sailboats.
in rowboats.
People are doing it in rowboats,
Rowboats.
kayaks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like to kayak and paddleboard,
Yeah,
but I don't think I want to go to
no.
Alaska.
Right.
No.
But it's a pretty cool race to watch
And
as
if you
well.
get second place, you get a set of steak knives.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're with a last name like Seaman, you kind of have to be.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It just naturally comes. When I was in the Coast Guard, I was enlisted.
So you were
I
Seaman.
was Seaman.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know, it's just, I was like, what? Yeah, it's true. That's what I was.
Well, I did happen to notice the wheel on your when you were campaigning.
Yeah, the ship's wheel. Yeah, that was my wife's idea, and I think
It was a great idea.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It was brilliant.
It was some good marketing there.
Mm-hmm.
So other than what do your family, do they get like outdoors as well? Or they get out boating, hiking, fishing? I mean, we live in just such a a cool place if you're outdoors. If
all
you're an
the
outdoor
above.
person, it's an amazing place.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're not an outdoor person, I think there's still plenty to catch a ferry on and go to Seattle and do.
Right.
But which, occasionally they like to go over. We like to see shows. Like I said, my youngest is in theater. My oldest is really into drums right now and music. But if they're not doing that, yes, big on hiking. It seems like if we can't make it on the weekend because we're doing something else, we're out hiking. We just did a great hike actually out at Evie's Landing on Whidbey Island. Have you guys been on that hike?
Mm-mm.
No.
All the years I've lived here, and I finally did it this last year, and I loved it so much I took some friends back about 3 weekends ago. Probably one of the best hikes I've been on, because you go up on this bluff, and it's like being up in the Alpine because you got this steep bluff, but then you're looking out at Admiralty Inlet, you're looking at Port Townsend,
Nice.
you're looking across to Marrowstone Island. It's just a gorgeous
That looks
hike.
great.
Yeah, so definitely put that one on your
I'm
Okay.
going to put it on my list for
Yeah,
sure.
it's a great hike.
So, all right, so that's recreation. Now we're going to shift to money. So, as we think about money, who or what's been the biggest influence on your financial life?
Financial life. In how so, like as an institution or just as like what?
Any kind of influence?
Maybe a lesson that you
lessons that
learned,
you've
or-
yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, hard lesson is we lived through the downturn in 2008.
Mm-hmm. That was
That
fun,
is a huge lesson.
As a
That's
business
a huge
owner.
lesson.
right?
I mean, I was in private practice at that time, and so, yeah, that was really tough. I had a lot of clients that were real estate investors, and I saw a lot of them go belly up. So I think, one of the hardest lessons that I learned is to know your limits, know your risk tolerance.
Understand risk.
And and in real estate especially, because I spent so much time in it, you really got to understand what you're getting into. Like, that piece of property might look great, it might seem like a screaming deal. There might be a reason for
There's
that.
usually a reason it's a screaming deal.
There might be an environmental problem that you have to deal with. There might be a zoning issue. There might be some underlying, neighbor nuisance problems you've got. So I think, from where I am in my life now, the downturn in 2008 was probably my biggest lesson financially. Like, what do you do? So,
I think, a lot of us learned a lot about risk.
Yeah.
In 2007, starting in 2007, 08, 09, there was a lot of lessons about
Yep.
risk and overexposure.
October 07 to
Yeah.
March 09.
yeah, is that what it was? It just seems like,
It was 08 with bookends.
yeah, it really
Yeah,
was.
everybody calls it 08, but it was 07 to 09, yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was interesting. So we talk about this a lot about, obviously in our world, talk about economists and projections and all that kind of thing. So every year, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the magazine right now, but one of the money magazines every year always puts out these economic forecasts
Right.
for the future. And in their January, their New Year's issue. And so the majority of economists that they reference, these are top name economists, and this is in the end of 2007, we're still making very positive projections for 2008. This was 2 years into the recession. Or, I'm sorry, not 2 years, 2 months
Okay.
already into the correction, and they still didn't recognize they were in one. And these are the top economists who are going, 2008 is going to be great. It's going to be wonderful.
Well, and I think probably the lesson I learned, and I don't know if you guys are this way, but it's so easy for the average person to get overextended, right? You buy everything on credit, which you can. You can live this really wonderful lifestyle on credit. But my associate Brittany Arnold, she ended up doing a lot of bankruptcy, so we learned a lot about bankruptcy over the years. That when she was primarily doing that for our firm, and I saw a lot of really tough stories. And so I talk about financial stuff. I like to save. I like to say, okay, if I don't need this today, can I save and buy it tomorrow, right? And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people aren't very good at following. It's like, we don't need it now. We can save and we can go tomorrow. I'm planning a trip. I know in a couple of years we want to go to Europe. I could pay for that right now, but no, I'm going to save and I'm going to pay for it and have it all paid off and not worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Or I could put it on a credit card at 20%.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that do that, and I always get a little nervous about it, how much people extend themselves.
Yeah. I get concerned about it because I see it often how precipitous it could be when it comes to when you think about retiring and you haven't considered that you have to recreate your income off of what you've saved.
Right.
And people tend to not really get that part of it until it can be often too late.
Yeah.
Well, and the one thing I wish I didn't have a lot of good financial advice, I think, when I was younger, because I was one of those guys that early on I was like, oh, I got a job, I can buy something. And if I had known when I was 18 to start putting $100 away at that moment into an IRA, if I could, man. So that's a lesson I'm teaching my kids right now. It's like, we are going to put money away and we're going to save for your retirement. Because you'll have so much more if you just save now. I mean, I know you guys know the math, and I know the math, and I'm sure your listeners probably know it if they run it. If you save early,
the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how
compounding
interest works.
Yes.
It's a great thing. So.
Yes. Yeah, and the minute they start earning, they can start contributing.
Yeah, I definitely would highly suggest that to any kid. It's just to do that now.
So when you think about your own retirement, kind of what comes to mind, like, what the reason, let me give you context here. So for some people, often we get people coming into our business here, our practice, and it's people who are already retired. Mm-hmm. Some people have that retirement date etched in stone on their desk, or we've got clients who've got little countdown timers going, kind of like back when you're in the service and you're like, hey, I got 3 months, 2 days, and a wake up, right? And then we have other people who, which I throw myself into that category, that retirement's not really something that you're too concerned about. Like, I don't have a date. I love what I do. I'm good at it. I can do it well into my later years. What is retirement? When you think about retirement, what does that mean to you, and what do you think about?
Well, so what I think about is I always want to get to a point in my life where I can retire, but I don't have to.
Work optional lifestyle.
That was almost like a commercial for Peaks Financial.
I know, isn't it?
Right?
A little bit.
Totally.
This was not planned, guys. I promise. No, I mean, we talk
about that all the time. It's. I was just having that we have a new client that was in this morning, and we were just having that conversation, and I was telling her it's an interesting thing sometimes when you run the numbers and you can retire.
Right.
It changes your entire perspective for many people. When you go, hey, you know what? I can walk away at any point. I don't have to do this anymore. I can stop. That's a very liberating place to be. And like I just mentioned, that I don't have any intention of retiring, but I also know the math that, obviously, because this is what I do for a living, that I need to be able to retire at some point in case for whatever reason, I can't continue to work. If I have a medical issue or whatever happens and I cannot continue to work, I need to be ready to retire at some point.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly how I think about retirement too. My wife and I are very, very cognizant of that, like, making sure that we put away enough every month for that. I mean, we have other retirement systems through our jobs and whatnot, but we always, we save in either a Roth or we have simple IRAs and stuff that we put in extra, because I do know that I'm kind of like you, Kevin. I probably won't retire. I'm one of those guys that I like to be busy. Mm-hmm. I may not want to keep being a judge after 20 years. After 20 years, I might stop being a judge. Right now, I foresee being a judge for 20 years, or maybe more. But there may be at some point in my life I say, I can retire, but maybe I'll go teach or I'll do something different, right? Mm-hmm. But if I always want to have that option. So that's how I'm planning. I'm planning that there's a certain date in my life that I can retire. I just don't have to unless I feel like it. That's
right.
how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's that work optional lifestyle. Yep. To me, I think a lot of people. It also depends on your profession. If you're working out in the shipyard and you're swinging a hammer down there, your retirement is a thing, right? Because there's only so many years you can do that. But for a lot of people, I think it's more about freedom of time and place. And if you can have that freedom of time and place and continue to work,
yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. So, awesome. From your perspective, here's a good one. What's wrong with the financial advice industry? What's wrong with my industry from your perspective?
Ooh.
Which you might have an interesting spot on how much if you've ever dealt with any financial stuff in litigation, so that you might have an interesting perspective.
Well, okay. I'm literally on the spot on this one. What's
and here you thought it was easy.
Right? Okay.
Do we have another hour? No. I mean, I think what what we see too often is a little bit of financial advice is often run through a algorithm, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like in the financial industry, you still need to have that personal customer service touch. So you have to have somebody that is calling you up, saying, "Hey, this is what's going on with the market. Maybe these are what the trends are doing." But I do feel like some of the bigger cookie cutter McDonald's-ish type firms, it's here's what's in our algorithm, and here's what you need to do, and then we'll see you in 6 months.
That's why we are a boutique, independent financial firm.
I kind of
because
imagine
we
that.
disagree with that.
Well, that's why I was a small law firm.
Yes,
Same thing.
exactly.
I didn't want to go work for a big firm. I mean, big firms have their time and place, but I wanted to put a personal touch. I had relationships with people, and that was important because I cared about what happened.
Yeah.
So that in our world, obviously there's a lot of AI going on right now. That's the big topic right now. And one of the things that I saw recently and that we've been fond of repeating is that the challenge is that, so you can do some things with artificial intelligence, but the problem is it has no emotional intelligence.
Right.
It can't understand all the nuance. It can understand how to trade and maybe how to manage some assets, but it can't understand how to put together a strategy for that's customized, because every single plan that we do in here is different.
Well,
everybody's situation is different.
I can't imagine artificial intelligence takes care of one factor. You know what that is? The irrationality of human beings.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, your market's driven by that, right? And
Right. That's very true.
You can't get away from that. Yeah. And so, as much as we want to have an AI maybe plug things in, I still think there's something about a gut instinct that a financial advisor like you guys is worth the while, because you can kind of look at the irrationality of human beings and say, my gut is telling me something.
Yeah. The ironic thing here is we don't do any gut investing here.
Right.
Everything we do is we're data geeks.
Well,
So everything we do is data driven.
We use trending and market and data and daily. Yeah.
Yeah, but you still have the ability to process that through a human lens.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at. Is I think that oftentimes gets missed. I mean, it's like it's in law. It's the same thing. We have AI that can write legal briefs, but a legal brief doesn't understand the emotion that a person is going through in a dissolution case.
Right.
So maybe I can make the argument, but should I?
Exactly. Just because that's the
I can
just
make
because
the
can doesn't mean you should.
I can make the investment, but should I?
Yep.
And I think that's something that can't be answered by computers.
That has to do with what comes in here.
Right. It's the ought to things. It's those. Sometimes it's the moral question. Right. Is this the morally right thing to do? And a computer is never going to be able to answer that.
No, because
there's too much nuance.
It's artificial. There is no morality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last couple of questions. So the podcast obviously is called Kitsap Matters. So we've talked a lot about Kitsap and the things going on here and how awesome Poulsbo is and Kitsap County. So what is your favorite thing about Kitsap County? Favorite thing, favorite place, favorite whatever of Kitsap County?
Best kept secret.
That's the next question.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So my favorite thing about Kitsap County. And this is actually this is a two-part answer, and I know it's going to sound a little cheesy, but hear me out for a second. It's location and the people. And what I mean by that is, first of all, we're so perfectly located. I mean, you just can't beat where we are in Western Washington. But the people that come here, I think, are kind of people who are adventure-minded, like the outdoors, care about their community. No offense to big city folk, but we like that kind of smaller town. I know my neighbors. I can talk to people feeling. So that's my favorite thing about Kitsap County, I think. That's why I left it and I came back.
Yep.
Right?
Goosebumps
Left
right
it temporarily and came back because I knew this is where I wanted to raise my kids.
And that's funny. We see that happen a lot. We've noticed that is that people can't wait to get out of here, and then they can't wait to get back. When they go out there and find out the rest of the world, they're like, you know what, the rest of the world kind of, I had it pretty good back home. Maybe it's time to go back home. So best kept secret in Kitsap: a restaurant, a beach,
a trail,
a trail. What is something that, like, if you're telling people who are visiting or something, you go, okay, don't tell anybody about this, but.
Well, all right. I mean, people know about it, but one of my favorite places to go is Point No Point in the summer. Okay, now, do you know, maybe you don't know, that there's the main parking area. But if you, about a half mile before you get up there, if you take a right, and I can't remember the name of the road, there's a trailhead that you can walk through the woods to get to the beach.
No, I missed that.
Okay, so there you go.
All right.
I wish I remember the name of the road right now, but it's pretty easy to find. So there's an actual trail that takes you through the woods and comes out on the south side of Point No Point, and then you can walk up the beach towards the lighthouse. And it's a beautiful walk, and we do that loop all the time. We walk the trail, especially even in the winter and the fall when the leaves are turning. It's a gorgeous hike. Best kept probably place to go other than that. Oh man, I always really liked Banner's Forest down in Olalla. This great mountain.
I have not been there.
Yeah, I mean the place up here in Fort Gamble is now competing with it with the mountain bike trails. But when I was a kid, Banner Forest was just a phenomenal place to go. You could do we did a lot of mountain biking down there. I remember there was a story years ago about a guy that got a couple bear attacked him and his dogs. So you got to be a little careful. But I mean, it's a great place it was a really great place. I love Port Orchard, South Kitsap area. It's just gorgeous down there too.
It is a beautiful, beautiful area.
I love where we live.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to beat.
Yeah.
All right, Chris has the final question.
I do.
Oh, now I'm a little scared.
You should be.
Don't be. So, if you were to be the producer of a reality TV show, what would the name of it be, and what would the premise be?
Ooh, of a reality TV show? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to being a judge. You know how like Judge Judy, was it Judge Brown, I think, are the kind of the big ones on TV, and you always see these people come in and they say kind of crazy things. Okay, so building off of that allure, I would call it dumb things not to do in court. And that would be the premise of some of the most bizarre arguments of people just coming in, and you get these just like crazy arguments. And I really loved, I did traffic court for years in Bremerton, and I love the people of Bremerton, so this is not a knock on them, but sometimes I had some of the craziest. You'd be like, what?
Did you just really say that?
Like, really? I had one time I had a young man who ran a red light, and we had a video of him running the red light, and he goes, well, I don't understand what the problem is. I identify with stopping. Well, okay, but we have a video that's objective, and of course the audience, poor kids, I think he was serious, and the audience starts laughing. I'm like, okay, let me explain the difference between subjective and objective, and I understand how you feel, but yeah, so that would be my premise. It would probably be like dumb things not to do.
I would watch that.
I think it'd be great because you see these videos. I've never, I've not spent a lot of time in courtrooms myself, thankfully. But you see these videos of people saying stuff that's just absolutely insane. Where you're like, did you really think that out in your head before you mentioned that?
And no disrespect to litigants, because we always want to give them a fair hearing, and we always listen. But sometimes you hear things and you just kind of go, huh? That's part of the job,
So it could be a reality TV show and maybe a how-to book or a self-help book. Self-help.
I think of that as a comedy show.
Yeah. Oh, actually, one of these days, I think I'm gonna probably go up to the high school and I'm gonna talk to the kids. It's been on my bucket list of things to do. Is like how to not get a traffic ticket, and the first thing is going to be, don't speed. Common sense.
It's pretty simple.
Just don't speed, and then you're probably not going to get a traffic ticket. Those common sense things.
Easy enough.
Yeah. So just because the sign says 25 miles an hour doesn't mean that the small print that says 20 between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. is ignored. Yeah. That's my peeve.
Little simple, common sense things.
Oh, it's funny.
Shane, thanks so much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate you being here.
I hope it wasn't too painful.
Oh, it wasn't. I no idea what I was walking into, but I've greatly enjoyed the time.
It's been fun. Good. It's been fun. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time on the Kitsap Matters podcast. Thanks.
Bye now.
A brief disclosure. This is a community-focused podcast, not a financial podcast, but sometimes financial topics do arise. And since the host is a licensed financial professional, we have to include the following disclosure in every episode. The strategies and concepts discussed are for educational purposes only and do not represent specific investment, tax, or estate planning advice. Investing carries an inherent element of risk, and it's in everyone's best interest to consult a tax, legal, or investment professional. Kevin Campbell is an investment representative of, and advisory services are offered through USA Financial Securities Corporation, a registered investment advisor located at 6020 East Fulton Street, Ada, Michigan, 49301. Peaks Financial is not affiliated with USA Financial Securities Corporation.